Jasmine Taylor stood frozen as the flight attendant blocked her from entering the cockpit. "Cleaning staff uses the rear entrance," he sneered. His smug expression vanished when the CEO emerged. "Meet our new owner," he announced. Too late, her decision to dissolve the entire cabin crew was already made. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed discrimination firsthand, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories of people overcoming injustice. Now, let's find out how Jasmine Taylor went from being mistaken for cleaning staff to becoming the most powerful woman in aviation. Growing up in Harlem, 8-year-old Jasmine Taylor never imagined herself soaring through the clouds until that fateful day at LaGuardia Airport. Her mother had taken her to watch planes take off, a free form of entertainment for a family struggling to make ends meet. That's when she spotted something she'd never seen before, a black female pilot confidently striding through the terminal, her gold-striped uniform gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Mama, that's what I want to be," little Jasmine declared, pointing excitedly. Her mother squeezed her hand. "Then that's what you'll be, baby girl." What her mother couldn't tell her was how treacherous that path would be. The American aviation industry had systematically excluded people who looked like Jasmine, with less than 2% of commercial pilots being black, and an even smaller percentage being black women. Throughout her teenage years, Jasmine devoured every book about aviation she could find. Her bedroom walls weren't covered with pop stars but with aviation charts and pictures of planes. When other girls received makeup for their 16th birthday, Jasmine asked for flying lessons. Flying lessons? Her high school counselor had laughed when she mentioned her career aspirations. "Have you considered nursing? Much more suitable for someone like you." Jasmine didn't bother responding. She'd learned early that her actions would speak louder than any words could. Aviation school proved to be the first real battleground. Instructors scrutinized her every move, often questioning her aptitude despite perfect test scores. During simulator training, male classmates made bets on how quickly she'd wash out. "Taylor, explain again why you think you're qualified to handle emergency protocols," her flight instructor would demand, despite her having recited the procedures flawlessly moments before. Meanwhile, Jasmine's grandmother fell ill, requiring expensive medications. Nights became an endless cycle of studying, caring for grandma, and working multiple jobs. She served tables at a local diner from 5 a.m. to noon, delivered packages until 6, then bartended until midnight. Somehow, she still maintained top grades. "You're killing yourself," her roommate warned. "No," Jasmine replied, calculating tips while reviewing atmospheric pressure charts. "I'm building my future." After graduation, the regional airline seemed like her only option. Blue Sky Regional hired her, though the interviewer made it clear he had concerns about passenger comfort with certain pilots. His meaning couldn't have been clearer. At Blue Sky, microaggressions became as routine as pre-flight checks. Male pilots frequently explained basic procedures to her. Passengers did double takes when she introduced herself as the captain. Flight attendants sometimes directed questions to her male co-pilots even when she was in command. "Did Captain Peterson step out?" a flight attendant once asked her co-pilot while Jasmine sat in the captain's seat, stripes clearly visible. Then came the day that changed everything. Flight 2187 to Denver hit unexpected turbulence that damaged an engine. Weather conditions were deteriorating rapidly, with visibility dropping to near zero. The situation required an emergency landing at a small airfield in terrible conditions. Jasmine's hands remained steady as she navigated the crippled aircraft. Her voice stayed calm over the intercom as she prepared passengers for a rough landing. When they touched down safely, all 89 souls aboard erupted in applause. The incident made regional news. "Female pilot shows exceptional skill in emergency," the headlines read, conveniently omitting her race. 2 weeks later, she received a call from SkyWest Airlines offering her a position. The salary was better, but the routes were less desirable, mostly red-eye flights and challenging weather patterns that senior pilots avoided. "They're setting you up to fail," her friend warned. "Then I'll just have to succeed spectacularly," Jasmine replied. She did exactly that, maintaining a perfect safety record despite the challenging conditions. However, promotions repeatedly went to less experienced pilots, all of whom happened to be white males. During a particularly turbulent flight to Chicago, Jasmine met William Bradford, an aging airline executive who was impressed by her calm handling of the rough conditions. After landing, he approached her. "That was some fine flying, Captain Taylor," he said, his eyes twinkling beneath bushy white eyebrows. "I've been watching your career with interest." William became an unexpected mentor, teaching Jasmine the business side of aviation that her technical training hadn't covered. He'd built and sold several successful airlines throughout his career and saw in Jasmine not just a skilled pilot but a natural leader. One evening over dinner, William made an unexpected proposal. "Liberty Airways is struggling," he explained. "Their management is stuck in the past, their customer service is abysmal, and their safety record is concerning. But they have valuable routes and a decent fleet." "What are you suggesting?" Jasmine asked, sensing where this was heading. "I'm suggesting we buy it," William replied simply. "I have the capital. You have the vision and expertise. Together, we could transform it." For 2 years, they meticulously planned the acquisition and transformation. William taught her everything about airline economics, fleet management, and corporate strategy. Jasmine absorbed it all while continuing to fly, building her experience and reputation. The purchase was structured carefully. William would initially appear as the primary buyer, with Jasmine as a silent partner. Over time, she would acquire his shares, eventually becoming the majority owner. This approach would prevent the existing management from sabotaging the deal if they realized a young black woman would be taking control. On a crisp autumn morning, the final paperwork was signed. Jasmine Taylor, the girl from Harlem who once couldn't afford proper flying lessons, now owned 51% of Liberty Airways. Only a handful of people knew the truth. To everyone else, she was simply one of Liberty's pilots. "When will you announce yourself as the owner?" William asked. Jasmine smiled. "Not yet. First, I need to understand every aspect of operations from the inside. I'll continue flying for a few months, observing, learning." Little did she know that decision would lead to the most humiliating and ultimately transformative moment of her career. 3 months after secretly becoming Liberty Airways' majority owner, Jasmine decided it was time for one final flight as a regular pilot. The following week, she would officially step into her role as owner and CEO. This last flight would be her farewell to the cockpit, at least temporarily, and a chance to observe the airline's operations from a pilot's perspective one more time. Flight 732 from Atlanta to Chicago wasn't particularly special, a routine domestic route using an Airbus A320. Jasmine had flown it dozens of times. But today's flight would be anything but routine. Due to a morning meeting with William to finalize her transition plan, Jasmine arrived at Atlanta International Airport in casual clothes, dark jeans, a simple blouse, and a leather jacket. Her pilot's uniform was packed in her carry-on. She'd changed before the pre-flight briefing. At the security checkpoint, the guard scrutinized her pilot ID with unusual intensity. "This says you're a pilot for Liberty," he said, suspicion evident in his tone. "That's correct," Jasmine replied calmly. "You sure this is yours?" he asked, glancing between her face and the ID several times. A line was forming behind her. The guard called over a supervisor, who quickly verified her credentials and waved her through with an apologetic smile. "Sorry about that, Captain Taylor. New guy." Jasmine nodded and continued toward the crew lounge. This type of interaction wasn't new, but it still stung each time. In the terminal, she encountered Derek Harrington, a veteran pilot who'd been with Liberty for 20 years. He was speaking with 2 other pilots when he spotted Jasmine. "Are you lost, miss?" he called out as she approached the pilot's lounge. "No, Captain Harrington," she replied, recognizing him from company photographs. I'm Captain Taylor. I'll be flying 732 to Chicago today. His eyebrows rose slightly. Oh. I didn't realize. I mean, you're not in uniform, so I assumed. I'll be changing shortly, Jasmine explained, keeping her tone professional despite the familiar discomfort rising in her chest. I had a meeting this morning. Right, of course, he stammered, clearly embarrassed but trying to recover. Well, welcome aboard. Liberty needs more, diverse perspectives. The awkward encounter was just the beginning. As Jasmine went through pre-flight procedures, she noticed subtle differences in how ground crew and flight attendants interacted with her compared to white male pilots. Questions that should have been directed to her as captain were often posed to her co-pilot, Anthony Ramirez, a Hispanic man who had been with Liberty for 5 years. To his credit, Anthony consistently redirected queries back to Jasmine, clearly recognizing the pattern of behavior. Captain Taylor is in command, he reminded them repeatedly. During the crew briefing, Jasmine met the flight attendants for the first time. Most were professional and attentive, but one, Cameron Wilson, barely concealed his disdain. He was a tall, blond man in his mid-30s with an artificially bright smile that disappeared whenever he addressed her. "You're the captain?" he asked, making no effort to hide his surprise. "Yes, Mr. Wilson." "Is there a problem?" Jasmine asked. "No, no problem," he replied with a tight smile that suggested otherwise. "Just surprised. Liberty doesn't have many, well, you know." Jasmine did know. Liberty had exactly 3 black female pilots out of 320 total pilots. She knew this because she'd reviewed the personnel files extensively before purchasing the airline. As she left the briefing room to change into her uniform, Jasmine overheard Cameron speaking to another flight attendant. "These diversity hires are getting out of hand," he muttered. "What's next? Pilots without licenses just to fill some quota?" The other flight attendant glanced uncomfortably in Jasmine's direction but said nothing to challenge Cameron's assertion. Jasmine had experienced this type of prejudice throughout her career. She'd learned to channel her anger into determination, to let her performance speak for itself. Today would be no different, though she made a mental note to review Cameron Wilson's personnel file more carefully once she officially took over. Fully uniformed now, with captain's stripes prominent on her shoulders, Jasmine walked confidently through the terminal toward the gate. Passengers were already boarding. She stopped briefly to chat with some excited children who pointed at her uniform, telling them about the physics of flight and encouraging their curiosity. When she approached the jet bridge, Cameron was checking boarding passes. He looked up and did a double take at her uniform. "Excuse me," Jasmine said politely. "I need to board for pre-flight checks." Cameron frowned. "Crew uses the rear entrance," he stated flatly. "Pilots board through the main door for pre-flight," Jasmine corrected him. "Not at Liberty," he insisted. "You must be new. Cleaning crews and all support staff use the rear entrance." The implication was clear, and heat rose to Jasmine's cheeks. She maintained her composure as several passengers watched the interaction with interest. "Mr. Wilson, I am Captain Jasmine Taylor, and I will be piloting this aircraft to Chicago. Please step aside." Cameron's expression hardened. "I'm going to need to see some ID. We can't have unauthorized personnel in the cockpit." Despite having already presented her credentials at the crew briefing, Jasmine calmly produced her pilot's license and Liberty Airways ID. Cameron made a show of examining them closely. "These look real enough, but I need to verify with the actual captain," he said, moving to block her path to the cockpit. At that moment, the airline's current CEO, Robert Phillips, happened to be boarding the flight for a routine inspection. He recognized the tension immediately and approached. "Is there a problem here?" he asked. "Sir," Cameron said deferentially, "I was just explaining to this person that unauthorized personnel can't enter the cockpit." Robert Phillips looked momentarily stunned. Then a smile spread across his face, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Wilson, allow me to introduce you to Captain Jasmine Taylor," he said slowly. "She's not only authorized to enter the cockpit, but as of last month, she's also the majority owner of Liberty Airways. My new boss, and yours." The color drained from Cameron's face as the implication sank in. Passengers who had witnessed the exchange began murmuring among themselves. Several had phones out, recording the interaction. Jasmine stood perfectly still, her expression unreadable despite the storm of emotions within. For a brief, powerful moment, she savored the look of utter shock on Cameron's face. Then, with the calm authority that had gotten her through countless challenges, she spoke just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Mr. Wilson, you're relieved of duty for this flight. Please collect your belongings and exit the aircraft." It wasn't what she had planned for her final flight as a line pilot. But in that moment, Jasmine Taylor made her first executive decision as Liberty Airways owner. "Captain Taylor, I didn't realize. I was just following protocol," Cameron stammered, his confident demeanor evaporating as rapidly as morning dew under a blazing sun. "Protocol?" Jasmine repeated, her voice measured despite the anger coursing through her. "Is it Liberty Airways protocol to profile your pilots based on race and gender, Mr. Wilson?" The gathered passengers had gone silent, many still recording with their phones. The tension in the air was palpable, like the static electricity before a thunderstorm. "No, of course not," Cameron backpedaled. "It was an honest mistake. You weren't in uniform when we first met, and I was in full uniform when you stopped me here," Jasmine interrupted. "And you checked my credentials during the crew briefing 30 minutes ago." CEO Robert Phillips stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the public nature of the confrontation. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," he suggested quietly. "No," Jasmine replied firmly. "Discrimination thrives in privacy, Mr. Phillips. This incident will be addressed transparently." She turned back to Cameron. "As I said, you're relieved of duty for this flight. Another flight attendant will need to take your place." Cameron looked desperately toward Phillips, hoping for intervention, but the CEO merely nodded in agreement. "You heard Captain Taylor. Please deplane immediately." With visible reluctance, Cameron collected his small bag and made his way off the aircraft, his face flushed with humiliation. As he passed through the cabin, the silence was broken by a single passenger who began to applaud. Others quickly joined in, creating a wave of support that followed Jasmine as she finally made her way to the cockpit. Inside, co-pilot Anthony Ramirez was already completing pre-flight checks. He looked up when she entered, his expression a mixture of embarrassment and admiration. "Captain, I'm so sorry about what happened," he said. "If I had known he was going to." "It's not your responsibility, Anthony," Jasmine assured him. "But thank you. I had no idea you were the new owner," he continued, clearly processing this revelation. "The rumors said some rich white guy from New York had bought us out." Jasmine smiled faintly as she settled into the captain's seat. "That was by design. I wanted to see Liberty Airways as it truly is before making changes." "Well," Anthony said with a grimace, "you certainly got an unfiltered view today." The flight's departure was delayed by 20 minutes as they waited for a replacement flight attendant. During this time, Jasmine maintained absolute composure, focusing on flight preparations despite the emotional turmoil within. She'd faced discrimination throughout her career, but never had it been so blatant, so public. When the new flight attendant, Sophia Washington, arrived breathlessly, the flight was finally cleared for departure. Jasmine's welcome announcement over the PA system was met with unusually enthusiastic applause from the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Jasmine Taylor speaking. I apologize for our delayed departure. We're now ready to proceed to Chicago. Our flying time today will be 2 hours and 15 minutes. The weather in Chicago is clear with light winds, and we expect a smooth flight. Thank you for choosing Liberty Airways. What she didn't say was that Liberty Airways would be fundamentally different by the time these passengers booked their next flight. The flight itself proceeded flawlessly. Jasmine handled the controls with the precision and confidence that had defined her career, navigating through a brief patch of turbulence with such skill that many passengers didn't even notice it. Throughout the flight, she maintained professional composure, betraying no sign of the incident that had preceded takeoff. Anthony, however, kept stealing glances at her. "So, what happens now?" he finally asked when they were halfway to Chicago. "Now we fly this plane to Chicago," Jasmine replied simply. "I mean with the airline." "With Wilson. Those decisions will come later," she said. "Right now, my job is to get these passengers safely to their destination. One task at a time, Anthony." Her focus was unwavering, but her mind was already cataloging the changes needed at Liberty. This incident wasn't isolated, it was symptomatic of a culture that needed complete transformation. As they began their descent into O'Hare International Airport, Jasmine's phone vibrated with incoming messages. She wouldn't check them until after landing, but she suspected the news was already spreading. Her suspicion was confirmed when they taxied to the gate. Through the cockpit window, she could see an unusual number of people waiting in the terminal, many with phones raised. "Looks like we're famous," Anthony commented, noticing the crowd. "Not we," Jasmine corrected him. "The story. Discrimination makes headlines, Anthony. Especially when it's captured on video." After completing the shutdown checklist, Jasmine stood to exit the cockpit. Anthony impulsively extended his hand. "It's been an honor flying with you, Captain Taylor. Or should I say, Ms. Owner?" Jasmine shook his hand firmly. "Captain is fine. I earned that title long before I could afford to buy an airline." As she stepped into the terminal, Jasmine was immediately approached by several passengers who wanted to express their support. Some asked for selfies, which she politely declined. Others simply wanted to shake her hand or offer words of encouragement. "My daughter wants to be a pilot," one woman told her, eyes glistening. "Seeing you today, it means everything." These moments of connection temporarily overshadowed the gravity of the situation, but reality crashed back when Jasmine checked her phone. The video of Cameron blocking her from the cockpit had indeed gone viral, already accumulating hundreds of thousands of views across multiple platforms. Hashtag Liberty Airways was trending, along with hashtag FlyingWhileBlack. Liberty's PR team had sent multiple urgent messages requesting her immediate input on their crisis response. William Bradford had called 6 times. The airline's legal team was preparing for potential repercussions. Instead of heading home, Jasmine went directly to her hotel room in downtown Chicago, which quickly transformed into an impromptu war room. Within an hour, key executives from Liberty had arranged an emergency video conference. "This is a PR nightmare," declared Vanessa Holt, Liberty's chief communications officer. "We need to issue a statement immediately condemning the incident and announcing Wilson's termination." "It's not that simple," countered James Lawson, head of legal. "Wilson's uncle sits on the board. There will be pushback." Jasmine listened to the debate silently, observing which executives seemed genuinely concerned about the discrimination and which were merely worried about public perception. It was telling information that would guide her decisions about who would remain in leadership once she officially took control. "Ms. Taylor," Vanessa finally said, "as the new owner, what direction would you like us to take?" All eyes turned to Jasmine. This was earlier than she had planned to assert her authority, but the circumstances demanded action. "First," she said calmly, "this isn't about public relations. It's about human dignity and a toxic culture that needs to change. Second, I don't want a generic statement condemning an isolated incident. What happened today wasn't isolated, it was the visible symptom of a systemic problem." She paused, noticing several executives shifting uncomfortably. "Tomorrow morning, I will address the entire company as its new owner and CEO. Today's incident has accelerated my timeline. Mr. Phillips, I appreciate your service, but effective immediately. I'll be assuming the role of Chief Executive Officer." Robert Phillips nodded stiffly. He'd been expecting this transition, though perhaps not so abruptly. As for Mr. Wilson, Jasmine continued, his actions warrant termination, regardless of his connections. But before that happens, I want a complete review of all complaints filed against him and how they were handled. I suspect today wasn't his first offense, just the first time he chose the wrong target. The meeting continued late into the night, with Jasmine systematically addressing each aspect of the crisis while simultaneously laying groundwork for the broader changes to come. By the time she finally ended the call at 2 in the morning, she had a clear battle plan for the days ahead. Alone in her hotel room, Jasmine finally allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. She thought about the little girl watching planes at LaGuardia, about her mother's unwavering belief, about her grandmother's sacrifices. She thought about every pilot who had tried to undermine her, every passenger who had questioned her qualifications, every system designed to exclude people who looked like her. "This ends now," she whispered to herself, gazing at the Chicago skyline. "Not just for me, but for every little black girl who looks up at the sky and dreams." With that promise to herself, Jasmine Taylor prepared for what would undoubtedly be the most challenging fight of her career, not in the cockpit, but in the boardroom. By 7 the next morning, Cameron Wilson had already begun mobilizing his considerable connections within Liberty Airways. His uncle, board member Franklin Wilson, had made several calls to other influential figures in the company, framing his nephew as the victim of an overreaction and political correctness gone mad. Jasmine's hotel phone rang just as she finished dressing for the day's confrontations. "Ms. Taylor," came the smooth voice of Thomas Miller, Senior Vice President of Operations and a 20-year veteran of Liberty. "I was hoping we could discuss yesterday's unfortunate misunderstanding before you make any public statements." Jasmine recognized the tactic immediately. "Mr. Miller, there was no misunderstanding. Your flight attendant refused entry to a uniformed captain with proper credentials based solely on race and gender assumptions. These situations are always nuanced," Miller insisted. "Cameron Wilson has an exemplary record with Liberty. Perhaps this could be handled quietly, a written warning, some sensitivity training. Making this public will only damage the company's reputation." "The company's reputation should reflect its actions and culture," Jasmine replied coolly. "And regarding Mr. Wilson's exemplary record, I've just reviewed his file. There have been 7 complaints of discriminatory behavior filed against him in the past 2 years alone. All mysteriously dismissed without investigation." There was a momentary silence on the line. "Those complaints were thoroughly reviewed by HR and found to be without merit," Miller finally responded, his tone noticeably less confident. "Were they? Because I'm looking at them now, and I don't see any evidence of investigation. Just signatures from management dismissing them, including yours, Mr. Miller." Another uncomfortable silence followed. "I'll see you at the board meeting at 10, Jasmine concluded, ending the call before Miller could respond. As she gathered her materials for the meeting, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text from William Bradford, "Be careful today. The old guard won't surrender without a fight. Remember what we discussed, strategic, not emotional." Jasmine smiled grimly at the reminder. In their planning sessions, William had repeatedly emphasized the importance of approaching resistance with calculation rather than reactive anger. "They'll expect you to be emotional," he'd warned. "That's their stereotype. Disappoint them with cold, hard facts and irrefutable logic." Throughout the morning, reports filtered in from allies within the company. Franklin Wilson had called an unofficial pre-meeting with several board members. HR was frantically reviewing Cameron's file, presumably to build some defense of their inaction. Several investors had called expressing concern about hasty decisions and negative publicity. Most disturbing was the discovery that someone, likely in corporate communications, had leaked misleading information to several media outlets. Stories were appearing questioning Jasmine's qualifications and suggesting she had staged the confrontation as a publicity stunt. Some reports falsely claimed she had recently been reprimanded for safety violations at her previous airline. When her assistant, Diego Morales, showed her the headlines, Jasmine felt a familiar knot in her stomach. This was the same playbook used against her throughout her career. When they couldn't attack her performance, they attacked her character. "They're trying to control the narrative," Diego observed, scrolling through the articles on his tablet. "Let them try," Jasmine replied, with steel in her voice. Narratives change when confronted with truth. Just before heading to the boardroom, Jasmine received a disturbing screenshot from Anthony Ramirez. It showed a private group chat among several Liberty employees, including pilots and management. The messages mocked her, questioned how she could afford to buy an airline, sugar daddy, one suggested, and discussed ways to undermine her authority. Most troubling were messages suggesting some employees would refuse to fly under her leadership. Jasmine added this evidence to her growing file. The culture problem at Liberty was even deeper than she'd suspected. As she walked toward the boardroom, her phone rang again. It was William. "Jasmine, I've been monitoring the situation. They're trying to paint you as incompetent and unstable. I know. Remember, they'll try to make this about you personally. Don't let them. Make it about Liberty's future. I won't let them derail me, William. One more thing," he added. "Thomas Miller has been calling Liberty's major investors claiming you plan to fire all senior management and implement extreme diversity quotas that will compromise safety. Several investors are spooked." Jasmine's jaw tightened. "Thanks for the heads up." She ended the call and paused outside the boardroom doors, taking a deep breath. Then, with the same confidence that had carried her through stormy flights and emergency landings, she pushed open the doors. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward her, the board members, plus key executives. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Franklin Wilson sat at the far end, his expression openly hostile. Next to him was Cameron Wilson, whose presence was itself a clear provocation since he had no official role warranting attendance at a board meeting. "Ms. Taylor," began Franklin Wilson before she had even taken her seat. "We've taken the liberty of drafting a joint statement regarding yesterday's regrettable incident. We believe this approach will allow us to put this matter behind us with minimal disruption. Have you ever witnessed a room full of powerful people trying to silence the truth? Would you stand up against a system designed to protect discrimination? Comment number 1 if you believe Jasmine should fire everyone involved in covering up previous complaints, or comment number 2 if you think she should take a more diplomatic approach. Don't forget to hit that like button if you've ever had to stand your ground against unfair treatment. What do you think will happen next? Will Jasmine back down under pressure from the board, or will she use this moment to transform Liberty Airways completely? Let's continue with this incredible story of courage and determination. Jasmine didn't immediately sit down. Instead, she calmly placed her leather portfolio on the table and looked each board member in the eye before speaking. "Before we begin, I notice Mr. Cameron Wilson is present. As he is neither a board member nor an executive officer of Liberty Airways, I must ask him to leave." Franklin Wilson's face reddened. "My nephew is here at my invitation to present his side of the story." "This is a board meeting, not a disciplinary hearing," Jasmine replied evenly. "If and when Mr. Wilson's behavior is formally reviewed, he will have ample opportunity to speak. Until then, this meeting is for board members and invited executives only." She turned to Cameron. "Mr. Wilson, please excuse us." For a moment, it seemed Cameron might refuse. He looked to his uncle for support, but Franklin gave him a slight nod. With obvious reluctance, Cameron stood and left the room, shooting Jasmine a venomous glare as he passed. Only then did Jasmine take her seat at the head of the table, a position traditionally reserved for the board chair but symbolically important for establishing her authority. "Now," she began, opening her portfolio, "let's discuss the future of Liberty Airways." "Ms. Taylor," Franklin interrupted, "with all due respect, we had agreed to address yesterday's incident first." "That's precisely what I intend to do, Mr. Wilson. But not as an isolated event, as a symptom of systemic issues that threatened this airline's viability. Jasmine withdrew a stack of reports from her portfolio and handed them to her assistant, Diego, who distributed copies to everyone present. What you're receiving is a comprehensive analysis of Liberty Airways' operational culture based on 3 months of direct observation and data analysis. You'll find it makes for sobering reading. The room fell silent as board members began flipping through the document. Jasmine had spent the entire night preparing it with her team, a brutal assessment of Liberty's toxic culture backed by irrefutable data. Page 3 shows the demographic breakdown of our workforce compared to industry standards, Jasmine continued. Liberty employs significantly fewer minorities and women in all positions, but particularly in leadership and technical roles. Page 5 details the passenger complaints categorized by nature and resolution status. Note the disproportionate number of service quality complaints from minority passengers. Thomas Miller cleared his throat. Ms. Taylor, while diversity is certainly important, I fail to see how these statistics relate to yesterday's misunderstanding. Turn to page 7, Mr. Miller, Jasmine replied without missing a beat. There you'll find a summary of all discrimination complaints filed internally at Liberty over the past 5 years. 78 complaints were filed. 0 resulted in disciplinary action. 43 were dismissed without investigation. The remaining 35 were resolved through transfers, predominantly transfers of the complainants, not the alleged perpetrators. Several board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Page 9 breaks down these complaints by department. Flight operations, which you oversee, Mr. Miller, accounts for 32% of all complaints, despite representing only 17% of our workforce. Miller's face flushed, but before he could respond, Jasmine continued. Page 12 details the financial impact. Liberty has quietly settled 11 discrimination lawsuits in the past decade, costing the airline $27 million in settlements and legal fees. None of these settlements were explicitly disclosed to shareholders as discrimination-related cases. Instead, they were buried under miscellaneous operational expenses. Robert Phillips, still technically CEO until Jasmine officially assumed the role, shifted uncomfortably. Those settlements included non-disclosure agreements. They were handled according to standard legal protocols. Hiding discrimination behind NDAs isn't a protocol, Mr. Phillips, it's a cover-up, Jasmine countered. And it's cost this airline millions while perpetuating a toxic culture. She stood and walked to the screen at the front of the room, activating a presentation that displayed passenger satisfaction scores broken down by demographic categories. These are our customer satisfaction metrics from the past 2 years. Note the consistently lower scores from Black, Hispanic, and Asian passengers. When surveyed about their experiences, these passengers frequently cited perceived bias in service quality. Franklin Wilson scoffed. Perceived bias isn't the same as actual discrimination. People see what they want to see. Is that what your nephew was doing when he blocked me from the cockpit, Mr. Wilson? Seeing what he wanted to see? Jasmine asked pointedly. Or was he demonstrating the exact bias these numbers reflect? Wilson fell silent. The incident with Mr. Wilson wasn't an anomaly, Jasmine continued. It was a manifestation of Liberty's cultural problems that are costing us customers, talent, and money. She clicked to the next slide, which showed Liberty's market position compared to competitors. 5 years ago, Liberty was the 4th largest carrier in our market segment. Today, we're 7th. Our growth has stagnated while more inclusive competitors have expanded. For the next hour, Jasmine methodically presented evidence linking Liberty's cultural problems to its declining business performance. She detailed how the airline's reputation had suffered, how recruitment of top talent had become increasingly difficult, and how employee turnover, particularly among minorities, was costing millions in training and lost productivity. By the time she finished, the mood in the room had shifted perceptibly. Several board members who had arrived ready to challenge her were now asking thoughtful questions about her assessment. Even Thomas Miller had grown quieter, perhaps realizing that his own position might be in jeopardy given the evidence against his department. Only Franklin Wilson remained openly hostile. "This is all very interesting, Ms. Taylor, but it doesn't change the fact that you've created a public relations crisis by overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. My nephew has served this airline faithfully for 12 years. Mr. Wilson," Jasmine replied calmly, "your nephew denied a uniformed, credentialed captain access to her cockpit based solely on racial and gender bias. That's not a misunderstanding, it's textbook discrimination. And based on the complaints in his file that were systematically ignored, it's part of a pattern." She turned to address the entire board. "Which brings me to the final portion of this meeting, my plan for Liberty Airways." Jasmine distributed another document, this one outlining her comprehensive strategy for transforming the airline. Liberty has tremendous potential that's being squandered by outdated thinking and toxic culture. My plan addresses both the immediate crisis and the long-term changes needed. The plan was bold but practical. It included a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, comprehensive bias training for all employees, recruitment initiatives to diversify the workforce, enhanced customer service protocols, and modernized fleet management. Each element was tied directly to business outcomes, improved customer satisfaction, reduced turnover, better talent acquisition, and ultimately, increased profitability. "This isn't about political correctness," Jasmine emphasized. "It's about business excellence. Diverse companies consistently outperform homogeneous ones. Inclusive cultures attract better talent and foster innovation. This is the path forward for Liberty." As the meeting progressed into its third hour, it became increasingly clear that Jasmine had won over most of the board. Her preparation, data-driven approach, and clear vision for the future had shifted the dynamic from confrontation to collaboration. By the meeting's end, the board had voted to approve Jasmine's immediate appointment as CEO and endorsed the first phase of her transformation plan. Only Franklin Wilson and one other board member voted against it. As the meeting adjourned, several board members approached Jasmine to express their support. Thomas Miller, notably, kept his distance. Franklin Wilson was the last to leave. As he passed Jasmine, he paused. "This isn't over, Ms. Taylor," he said quietly. "You may have won them over today, but Liberty has deep roots and long memories." Jasmine met his gaze steadily. "You're right about one thing, Mr. Wilson. This isn't over. It's just beginning." After everyone had left, Jasmine remained in the boardroom, allowing herself a moment to process what had just occurred. She had accelerated her timeline by months, taking control of Liberty under pressure rather than through the measured transition she'd planned. The challenges ahead would be enormous. Her phone buzzed with a text from William, "Heard you knocked it out of the park. Not surprised. Call me when you can." As she gathered her materials, Jasmine reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday, she'd been Captain Taylor, quietly observing Liberty from the cockpit. Today, she was CEO Taylor, with the power, and responsibility, to transform an entire airline. The real work was just beginning. 2 weeks after assuming control of Liberty Airways, Jasmine returned to her apartment in New York after an exhausting cross-country series of meetings with regional managers. All she wanted was a hot shower and uninterrupted sleep. Instead, she found a pile of mail that her neighbor had collected while she was away. Mixed in with bills and magazines were 3 envelopes with no return addresses. Inside the first was a crude drawing of a lynching with, "Go back where you came from," scrawled across the bottom. The second contained a newspaper clipping about Liberty with her face circled and the words, "Affirmative Action Hire," written in red marker. The third simply read, "We're watching you," in letters cut from magazines, like a ransom note from a bad movie. Jasmine had expected backlash, but the personal nature of the threats, sent to her private residence, was unsettling. She photographed everything for her security team before disposing of the hate mail. Her phone rang as she was making tea to calm her nerves. It was her grandmother's caretaker, Loretta. "Miss Taylor, I think you should come by." Your grandmother's not doing well. Jasmine felt her heart sink. What happened? Her blood pressure's through the roof. The doctor says it's stress. She's been watching the news about you, and those reporters came by again yesterday. Reporters came to Gran's house? Jasmine asked, alarmed. Third time this week. Asking all kinds of questions about you, your childhood. One of them showed her some awful comments people were making online. Got her all upset. Jasmine closed her eyes, fighting the surge of anger. Her grandmother was 82 and had already survived 2 strokes. The last thing she needed was media harassment. I'll be there in 30 minutes, she promised. When Jasmine arrived at her grandmother's modest Harlem apartment, she found the elderly woman sitting in her favorite armchair, looking smaller and more fragile than Jasmine remembered. There's my girl, Eleanor Taylor said, her voice weaker than usual but her eyes lighting up at the sight of her granddaughter. The big airline boss. Jasmine knelt beside the chair and took her grandmother's hand. How are you feeling, Gran? Oh, don't you worry about me. I'm tougher than I look. She squeezed Jasmine's hand. It's you I'm worried about. Those horrible things they're saying on the TV. Don't listen to them, Gran. It's just noise. Eleanor's expression grew serious. It's more than noise when they send people to my door asking if you had a troubled childhood, or if you have radical political beliefs. One of them even asked if you'd ever been arrested. Can you imagine? Jasmine could imagine it all too well. Character assassination was a predictable response to her taking control of Liberty. What she hadn't anticipated was that they would drag her family into it. I'm going to hire security for your building, Jasmine decided aloud. No more reporters bothering you. You'll do no such thing, Eleanor protested. I don't need guards scaring my neighbors. Then come stay with me for a while. My place has doormen and security systems. Eleanor shook her head stubbornly. This is my home. I'm not being chased out of it by some vultures with cameras. Her expression softened. But you could stay here tonight. I'd sleep better knowing you're close. Jasmine ended up spending the night in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by the aviation posters and model planes of her youth. The familiar setting should have been comforting, but she barely slept, worried about her grandmother in the next room and the forces aligning against her at Liberty. The next morning, her phone woke her at 5 a.m. Diego calling with an urgent update. 3 of our senior pilots have submitted their resignations, he reported. All citing concerns about the company's new direction. Jasmine wasn't surprised. She'd expected some departures, especially from those most resistant to change. Who specifically? Harrington, Steele, and Peterson. All white men with close ties to Thomas Miller and Franklin Wilson. Their departures were symbolic, an attempt to undermine confidence in her leadership. Accept their resignations effective immediately, Jasmine instructed. And Diego, check if they've been in contact with SkyPath Airlines. I suspect they already have jobs lined up there. SkyPath was Liberty's main competitor, and its CEO, Jackson Reynolds, had made several dismissive public comments about Jasmine's appointment. After checking on her grandmother, who was sleeping peacefully, Jasmine headed to her office at Liberty headquarters. She was reviewing pilot scheduling when she received a call from her fiancé, Jordan Bennett. Have you seen the news? He asked without preamble. Which piece? The Wall Street Times. Business section. They're running a profile questioning how you financed the Liberty purchase. Jasmine felt a flash of anger. Let me guess, they're implying I couldn't possibly have afforded it legitimately. Pretty much. They're suggesting William Bradford is the real owner and you're just a diversity figurehead. There's also something about your previous airline having safety concerns about your judgment. That's absolutely false, Jasmine said, her voice tight. I had a perfect safety record. I know that, and you know that, Jordan replied, but this is starting to affect us. A client asked me yesterday if I was worried about being associated with you. My own law partners are getting nervous about the publicity. Jordan was a partner at a prestigious corporate law firm with conservative clients. Jasmine had always known his career could be affected by controversy, but hearing it stated so bluntly stung. "What are you saying, Jordan?" There was a long pause. "I'm saying maybe we should postpone the wedding until this dies down. Give your situation at liberty time to stabilize." The words hit Jasmine like a physical blow. She and Jordan had been planning their wedding for over a year, with the date set for just 3 months from now. "You want to postpone our wedding because I'm facing racism at work?" she asked incredulously. "That's not fair, Jazz. You know I support you completely. But this isn't just about racism, it's becoming a media circus that's affecting both our careers. I'm just suggesting a temporary delay until things calm down." Jasmine closed her eyes, suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. "I need to think about this, Jordan. I'll call you later." She ended the call and sat in silence, trying to process this new betrayal from someone she had believed would stand by her through anything. The day continued to spiral downward. When she left the office that evening, she found her car had been vandalized in the parking garage, racial slurs spray-painted across the driver's side door. Security cameras in that section had mysteriously malfunctioned. As she waited for a taxi, having declined a security escort earlier that day, Jasmine felt more alone than she had since her mother's death a decade ago. The weight of what she was attempting, and the forces aligned against her, seemed suddenly overwhelming. The taxi dropped her at her apartment building, where the doorman handed her a large envelope that had been delivered by courier. Inside was a formal offer from SkyPath Airlines to purchase Liberty at a substantial premium, along with a personal note from CEO Jackson Reynolds suggesting this was a graceful exit strategy from an untenable situation. Upstairs, Jasmine poured herself a glass of wine and stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. The buyout offer was tempting. She could walk away with a significant profit and leave behind the daily battles. Jordan would be pleased. Her grandmother would be safe from harassment. Life could return to normal. But what message would that send to every little black girl who dreamed of flying? What would it say to every person who had faced discrimination and been told to accept it as just the way things are? Her phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. Expecting more harassment, she was surprised to find a different message. "Captain Taylor, you don't know me, but I was a passenger on your Atlanta-Chicago flight. I just wanted to say thank you for standing your ground. My daughter saw the video and now she wants to be a pilot too. You're making a difference." Attached was a photo of a smiling black girl of about 7, wearing makeshift pilot wings crafted from aluminum foil. Jasmine felt tears welling in her eyes, the first she had allowed herself since this ordeal began. This was why she couldn't quit. This was what made the personal cost bearable. Later that night, she visited her childhood neighborhood in Harlem. Walking the familiar streets, she remembered the little girl who had looked up at passing planes with such longing. That child had faced obstacles that seemed insurmountable, yet she had persevered. Near her grandmother's building, Jasmine passed a community center where a group of teenage girls was leaving an evening program. Several recognized her from the news and approached excitedly. "Are you really the lady who owns the airline?" one asked. "Yes, I am," Jasmine replied. "That's so dope," another girl said. "My teacher showed us the video. That flight attendant was way out of line." "You showed him though," added a third. "My mom says you're like a modern Bessie Coleman." The comparison to the pioneering black female aviator warmed Jasmine's heart. "That's a huge compliment. Bessie Coleman had to go all the way to France to get her pilot's license because no one in America would teach a black woman to fly." "For real?" one of the girls asked. "That's messed up." It was. And while things have improved since then, we still have a long way to go. "Are you scared?" the youngest girl asked suddenly. "My brother says they're trying to run you out of business." Jasmine considered the question honestly. Sometimes I am scared, she admitted. But being scared doesn't mean you stop fighting for what's right. The girls nodded solemnly, and Jasmine realized they understood far more about the world's injustices than she had at their age. As she said goodbye to them, Jasmine felt her resolve strengthening. The personal costs were high: hate mail, vandalism, strain on her relationship, her grandmother's health, constant scrutiny, and isolation. But the cost of surrender would be even higher. She returned to her apartment and called Jordan. "I've been thinking about what you said," she told him. "And I want to be clear, I will not postpone our wedding because of racism, corporate politics, or media pressure. If you want to marry me, it happens as planned. If that's too difficult for you right now, I understand, but I won't put my life on hold because others are uncomfortable with my success." There was a long silence before Jordan responded. "You're right. I was wrong to suggest it. The wedding stays on the calendar." "Thank you," Jasmine said, though she noted his reluctance. Their relationship had suffered a crack that would need attention once the current crisis stabilized. Next, she called William Bradford. "Skypath made an offer for Liberty," she told him. "I suspected they might," William replied. "It's a standard tactic: wait until there's turmoil, then swoop in with what seems like a lifeline." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I didn't buy this airline just to flip it at the first sign of trouble." William chuckled. "That's my girl. So what's the plan?" "It's time to take this battle public," Jasmine decided. "No more reacting. From now on, we control the narrative." As she ended the call, Jasmine looked at the photo of the little girl with homemade pilot wings. She saved it to her phone's home screen, a reminder of why the personal cost, however painful, was worth bearing. Tomorrow, the real counteroffensive would begin. The morning shows were abuzz with Cameron Wilson's carefully crafted redemption tour. Dressed in a somber suit with a pained expression, he sat across from sympathetic hosts on Wake Up America. "I've spent 12 years providing excellent service to Liberty Airways passengers," he explained, his voice catching theatrically. "One misunderstanding, one mistake, and my entire career is destroyed." The host nodded sympathetically. "And you've apologized for this mistake?" "Repeatedly," Cameron insisted. "I've reached out to Ms. Taylor multiple times. But she seems determined to make an example of me rather than accept that humans sometimes make errors in judgment." He sighed deeply, portraying himself as the victim of an overzealous executive with something to prove. "I'm not saying bias doesn't exist in America. Of course it does. But not every misunderstanding is racism. Sometimes a mistake is just a mistake." This calculated performance was playing out across multiple networks, part of a coordinated campaign to reshape public perception. Meanwhile, social media was flooded with the hashtag Boycott Liberty Airways, promoted by accounts with suspicious patterns suggesting many were bots rather than genuine users. Liberty's stock had dropped 11% in the past week as the controversy continued to swirl. Investment analysts were questioning Jasmine's experience, business columnists were writing think pieces about diversity at the expense of meritocracy, and competitors were capitalizing on the turmoil with targeted advertising campaigns. "Fly with pilots chosen for skill, not social statements," read one particularly offensive Skypath advertisement that had appeared briefly before being pulled amid backlash. Jasmine observed all of this from the quiet of her office, maintaining public silence as she prepared her response. While Cameron was making his media rounds, she was gathering facts, building alliances, and constructing a strategy that would address not just the immediate crisis but the underlying issues it had exposed. When Diego entered with her morning briefing, she was reviewing a comprehensive report prepared by an independent firm she'd hired to audit Liberty's hiring and promotion practices. "They're really pushing the narrative that you overreacted," Diego noted, having seen the morning shows. "Let them," Jasmine replied calmly. "The longer they talk, the more rope they give us. Our PR team is getting antsy. They want to issue more statements, do some damage control. No more reactive statements, Jasmine said firmly. We move forward with the plan as discussed. Is everything ready for this afternoon? Diego nodded. The team at Bloomberg Business Report is prepared for your interview. They've agreed to your conditions, unedited, live, with no topics off limits. Good. And the document release? Ready to go live on our website simultaneously with your interview. Legal has cleared everything. Jasmine nodded, satisfied. Then we proceed as planned. At precisely 2 o'clock that afternoon, Jasmine Taylor appeared on Bloomberg Business Report, one of the most respected financial news programs in the country. Unlike Cameron's emotional appeals on entertainment-focused morning shows, she had chosen a venue known for substance and analytical rigor. She arrived impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, her composure absolute as she took her seat across from veteran journalist Michael Chen. Ms. Taylor, thank you for joining us, Chen began. You've been notably silent as this controversy has unfolded. Why speak now? Because this isn't about a single incident, Mr. Chen, Jasmine replied. It's about systemic issues in the airline industry and American business more broadly. I've taken these weeks to thoroughly investigate those issues within Liberty Airways before addressing them publicly. Mr. Wilson, the flight attendant at the center of this controversy, claims this was simply a misunderstanding that's been blown out of proportion. How do you respond? I understand why Mr. Wilson would characterize it that way, Jasmine said evenly. However, the evidence suggests otherwise. Simultaneously with this interview, Liberty Airways is releasing a comprehensive report on our internal practices, including documentation of 7 previous discrimination complaints against Mr. Wilson that were dismissed without investigation. Chen looked momentarily surprised by this revelation. 7 previous complaints? Yes. All filed by minority passengers or colleagues. All dismissed by management without proper investigation. This pattern suggests the incident with me wasn't an isolated mistake but part of a systemic problem. The interview continued with Jasmine methodically addressing each aspect of the controversy. When asked about her qualifications to run an airline, she detailed her extensive flight experience, her business education, and the succession of leadership roles she had held. When questioned about Liberty's declining stock price, she presented a cogent analysis of short-term market reactions versus long-term value creation through cultural transformation. Throughout, she maintained a balance of confidence, expertise, and composure that contrasted sharply with Cameron's emotional appeals and vague accusations. Some critics have suggested your focus on diversity is distracting from Liberty's operational challenges, Chen noted toward the end of the interview. That perspective assumes diversity and operational excellence are somehow in opposition, Jasmine responded. The data suggests otherwise. Companies with diverse leadership consistently outperform their homogeneous counterparts. They're more innovative, more adaptable, and more attuned to a diverse customer base. She leaned forward slightly, emphasizing her next point. At Liberty, we're not pursuing diversity instead of excellence. We're pursuing excellence through diversity. And the early results are promising. As the interview concluded, Jasmine made a final statement that would be quoted extensively in the days that followed. The question isn't whether Liberty Airways can afford to change its culture. The question is whether we, as a company and as a society, can afford not to. The cost of discrimination isn't just moral, it's economic. It's measured in lost talent, untapped markets, and diminished innovation. That's a price no business can sustain in today's global economy. The interview was immediately hailed as a masterclass in crisis management. Unlike Cameron's emotional appeals, Jasmine had brought data, analysis, and a compelling vision for the future. Market analysts noted that Liberty's stock began recovering even before the interview concluded. Simultaneously with her appearance, Liberty Airways published a comprehensive report on its website detailing the company's historical diversity issues and the concrete steps being taken to address them. The report included anonymized accounts from employees who had experienced discrimination, statistical analyses of hiring and promotion patterns, and a clear roadmap for transformation. Most damaging to Cameron's narrative were the 7 previous complaints against him, now public with identifying details redacted. They painted a clear picture of a pattern of behavior rather than a single misunderstanding. By evening, the tide of public opinion was shifting. The hashtag #FlyLiberty was trending, with many users expressing support for Jasmine's transparent approach to addressing difficult issues. But the most significant development came from an unexpected source. 3 former Liberty flight attendants, having seen the report, came forward publicly with their own experiences of discrimination involving Cameron Wilson. One, a black woman named Nia Robinson, described being called affirmative action hire by Cameron repeatedly during her training. Another, Luis Mendez, detailed how Cameron had scheduled him for less desirable routes after he filed a complaint about Cameron's comments regarding his accent. These testimonials lent human faces to the statistics in Liberty's report and further undermined Cameron's claims of being unfairly targeted. The narrative was shifting, but Jasmine knew the battle was far from over. That evening, as she reviewed media coverage of the day's events, her security team alerted her to concerning information. Someone had been investigating her financial history, attempting to access her bank records and tax returns. The digital trail led back to a private investigator with connections to Franklin Wilson. "They're getting desperate," William Bradford observed when she called to inform him. "They couldn't discredit you professionally, so now they're looking for personal dirt." "Let them look," Jasmine replied. "My finances are clean. The Liberty purchase was completely legitimate." True, but desperate people can twist even innocent facts. Be prepared for more attacks. William's warning proved prescient. The next morning, a tabloid published an exposé questioning the source of Jasmine's wealth, implying impropriety in how she had afforded her stake in Liberty. The article was filled with innuendo rather than evidence, but it achieved its purpose of planting seeds of doubt. Jasmine had anticipated this move, however. Working with her legal team, she released her complete financial history, showing how she had saved aggressively throughout her career, made shrewd investments in tech startups, and leveraged her assets strategically for the Liberty purchase with Williams' backing. This unusual level of transparency neutralized the attack before it gained traction. Financial analysts who reviewed the documents confirmed that Jasmine's path to ownership, while impressive, was entirely plausible and legitimate. As the week progressed, a comprehensive investigation by Aviation Weekly uncovered something even more damaging to Cameron and his supporters, records showing he had been dismissed from 2 previous airlines for similar behavior before joining Liberty. These dismissals had been concealed when he was hired at Liberty through connections with Franklin Wilson, who had been on the hiring committee. The revelation shifted the conversation from whether Cameron had been unfairly terminated to how he had managed to remain employed at Liberty despite his history. Public opinion continued to evolve as the full context emerged. Industry publications that had initially questioned Jasmine's approach now praised her transparency and systematic response to deep-seated issues. Business schools began developing case studies on her handling of the crisis. Even more encouraging were the messages flooding in from Liberty employees expressing support and sharing their own experiences of bias within the company. What had begun as an isolated incident was catalyzing a company-wide reckoning with its culture. 8 days after her Bloomberg interview, Jasmine received word that Cameron Wilson had filed a wrongful termination lawsuit against Liberty Airways, claiming discrimination against him as a white male. The lawsuit seemed designed more for publicity than legal merit, with Cameron holding press conferences that portrayed him as a victim of reverse discrimination and cancel culture. Rather than responding directly to these provocations, Jasmine focused on moving Liberty forward. She announced an expanded international route structure that would create hundreds of new jobs, introduced a revamped training program emphasizing inclusivity and customer service, and unveiled a scholarship foundation for underrepresented youth interested in aviation careers. Each positive initiative further isolated Cameron and his supporters, making their attacks seem increasingly petty and self-serving in comparison to Liberty's forward-looking approach. The turning point came when pilots and flight attendants from across Liberty's network began publicly supporting Jasmine's leadership. In a powerful show of solidarity, over 200 crew members signed an open letter affirming their commitment to transforming Liberty's culture and supporting its new direction. What had begun as a crisis was evolving into an opportunity for genuine transformation. Liberty Airways was becoming a case study in how confronting discrimination directly could lead not just to cultural improvement but to business renaissance. As Jasmine reviewed the latest passenger satisfaction scores, already showing improvement, she reflected on how dramatically the situation had changed in just a few weeks. By refusing to be silenced, by bringing data and transparency to bear on long-hidden problems, she had begun to shift not just Liberty's trajectory but perhaps the conversation about diversity in corporate America more broadly. The public battle was turning in her favor. Now it was time to ensure that the external victory translated into genuine internal change. 1 month after the viral incident, Jasmine stood in Liberty Airways' largest hangar at JFK International Airport. Before her were 500 employees, pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, gate agents, and administrative staff, gathered for her first company-wide address as CEO. Thousands more were watching via live stream from Liberty facilities across the country. The hangar had been transformed for the occasion. Behind Jasmine stood one of Liberty's newest Boeing 787s, freshly painted with a slightly redesigned livery that maintained the airline's traditional colors but incorporated a more dynamic, forward-looking aesthetic. The symbolism was intentional, honoring Liberty's history while embracing change. Jasmine took a deep breath as Diego gave her the signal that the live stream was active. This speech would set the tone for everything that followed. "Good morning, Liberty," she began, her voice clear and confident. "Today marks a new chapter in our company's story. One that we will write together." Rather than standing behind a podium, Jasmine moved to the center of the stage, creating a more intimate connection with her audience. "I want to begin by sharing something personal with you. When I was 8 years old, growing up in Harlem, my mother took me to LaGuardia Airport to watch planes take off. Money was tight, but watching aircraft soar into the sky was free entertainment for a curious child. The hangar was completely silent as employees listened intently. That day, I saw something that changed my life, a black female pilot walking through the terminal. In that moment, I discovered what was possible. But in the years that followed, I also discovered how difficult the path would be." Jasmine recounted her journey through aviation school, where instructors questioned her abilities despite perfect test scores. She described the countless times passengers had done double takes when she introduced herself as captain, the male colleagues who explained basic procedures to her despite her expertise, and the promotions that went to less qualified candidates. "I'm sharing these experiences not to dwell on past injustices, but to ensure we understand the reality many of our colleagues face daily. These aren't isolated incidents or personal grievances, they're symptoms of systemic barriers that have limited not just individual careers but Liberty's collective potential." She paused, surveying the audience. Some nodded in recognition of experiences that mirrored their own. Others looked uncomfortable, perhaps confronting these realities for the first time. The incident that many of you witnessed, either in person or through that viral video, wasn't the beginning of this conversation. It was simply the moment when we could no longer avoid it. Jasmine then shifted from personal narrative to business strategy, presenting data that linked diversity and inclusion directly to operational excellence, customer satisfaction, and financial performance. "This isn't about political correctness or public relations," she emphasized. "It's about building an airline that reflects the diversity of the customers we serve, that harnesses the full spectrum of human talent, and that treats every employee and passenger with dignity. That's not just morally right, it's good business." With that foundation established, Jasmine introduced her vision for Liberty's future, including the new executive team she had assembled over the past month. As each new leader joined her on stage, the diversity of the group was striking, not just in terms of race and gender, but also in background, expertise, and perspective. Darius Washington, a former military pilot with extensive international experience, would serve as Chief Operating Officer. Sophia Chen, previously a successful tech executive known for transforming corporate cultures, would be Chief People Officer. James Rodriguez, a financial wizard who had turned around two struggling regional carriers, would be chief financial officer. This team wasn't chosen to fill quotas, Jasmine stated clearly. They were chosen because their diverse perspectives and proven expertise make us stronger. Each brings unique insights that will help Liberty navigate the challenges ahead. With her leadership team in place, Jasmine outlined concrete policy changes effective immediately. First, Liberty Airways is implementing a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. This isn't about policing language or walking on eggshells, it's about ensuring every employee and passenger is treated with basic dignity. She detailed the new reporting system designed to ensure complaints were properly investigated rather than dismissed or buried. Second, we're establishing employee resource groups to provide support, mentorship, and feedback across the organization. These groups will have direct access to executive leadership to ensure your voices are heard. Jasmine then announced a comprehensive review of hiring, training, and promotion practices to identify and eliminate bias. Pay equity audits would ensure equal compensation for equal work. New recruitment initiatives would expand Liberty's talent pipeline to include qualified candidates from underrepresented communities. Finally, we're launching the Liberty Future of Flight Academy, a scholarship program to support diverse students pursuing careers in aviation. Because the 8-year-old girl watching planes today should see all doors open to her tomorrow. As Jasmine concluded the formal portion of her address, she moved to the heart of her message. I know some of you have concerns about these changes. You may worry that standards will be lowered, that traditions will be abandoned, or that your own opportunities might be limited. I want to address those fears directly. She looked out at the sea of faces, making eye contact with as many employees as possible. Excellence remains our standard, for everyone. We will never compromise safety, service quality, or operational performance. What we're changing isn't our commitment to excellence but the barriers that have prevented some from demonstrating their excellence. Jasmine opened the floor for questions, committing to transparency even when the questions were challenging. Some employees expressed enthusiastic support for the new direction. Others raised concerns about implementation or specific policies. A few voiced skepticism that real change was possible in an industry as traditional as aviation. She addressed each question honestly, acknowledging limitations and uncertainties while maintaining confidence in the overall vision. The exchange was sometimes tense but always respectful, modeling the kind of open dialogue she hoped to foster throughout the company. As the town hall concluded, Jasmine made a final observation. Change isn't easy. It requires courage to question long-held assumptions, humility to acknowledge blind spots, and perseverance to build new habits. There will be missteps along the way, including mine. What matters is our commitment to learning and growing together. The response was not universal applause, that would have been unrealistic, but there was a palpable sense of possibility in the hangar. For many employees who had felt marginalized within Liberty's culture, Jasmine's words represented hope for genuine change. For others, her emphasis on excellence and business performance provided reassurance that the changes were pragmatic rather than ideological. However, not everyone embraced the new vision. In the days following Jasmine's address, resistance emerged from entrenched middle management, particularly those with connections to Thomas Miller and Franklin Wilson. Some department heads dragged their feet on implementing new policies. Others paid lip service to the changes while maintaining old practices. Jasmine had anticipated this resistance. She had deployed a network of change agents throughout the organization, respected employees at various levels who supported the transformation and could identify bottlenecks. Their reports revealed concerning patterns. In the flight operations department, schedules were being manipulated to assign minority pilots disproportionately to less desirable routes. In training and development, certain instructors were applying different standards to different candidates. In several regional offices, managers were discouraging employees from participating in the new resource groups. Rather than addressing these issues punitively, Jasmine took a strategic approach. She rotated resistant managers to different departments, breaking up entrenched power structures. She paired skeptical leaders with enthusiastic ones, creating opportunities for perspective shifts. And where necessary, she made personnel changes, always based on documented performance issues rather than mere resistance to change. The most dramatic confrontation came when Liberty's systems detected an attempted sabotage of the new anonymous reporting platform. The digital trail led to a senior IT manager with close ties to Franklin Wilson. When presented with the evidence, the manager resigned immediately rather than face termination and potential legal consequences. This incident sent a clear message throughout the organization: opposition was acceptable, sabotage was not. As these internal struggles unfolded, something remarkable was happening on Liberty's front lines. Flight crews who embraced the new culture were delivering noticeably improved customer service. Passengers were commenting on the positive atmosphere on board Liberty flights. Social media was filling with stories of exceptional experiences, particularly from minority travelers who had previously felt unwelcome. These positive developments strengthened Jasmine's position internally. Employees who had been fence-sitters began actively supporting the changes as they saw tangible benefits. Regional managers who had initially resisted started requesting resources to accelerate implementation in their areas. The transformation wasn't without setbacks. A group of employees led by supporters of Cameron Wilson filed a class action lawsuit claiming the new policies discriminated against white male employees. The suit received extensive coverage from conservative media outlets, temporarily reigniting public controversy. However, Liberty's legal team had carefully crafted all new policies to be inclusive rather than exclusive. The focus was on removing barriers for underrepresented groups, not creating new ones for others. When the actual policy documents were made public as part of the legal proceedings, they undermined the lawsuit's central claims. The turning point in Liberty's internal revolution came from an unexpected source. Senior flight attendant Patricia Winters had been with the airline for 27 years and was widely respected for her professionalism and institutional knowledge. She had initially been skeptical of Jasmine's leadership, viewing the changes as unnecessary disruption to established protocols. However, after witnessing the positive impact of the new approach, both on employee morale and passenger experience, Patricia became a powerful advocate for the transformation. Her conversion was particularly influential because she couldn't be dismissed as a political appointee or outside agitator. She was Liberty, through and through. When Patricia organized a petition supporting the new direction, signed by over 70% of Liberty's flight crews, it marked a decisive shift in the company's internal dynamics. The old guard was now clearly in the minority, their resistance increasingly isolated and ineffective. Franklin Wilson made one final attempt to undermine Jasmine, calling for a special board meeting to review her performance. His formal complaint cited declining employee morale, operational disruptions, and damage to Liberty's brand, all claims contradicted by the airline's improving metrics. The board meeting that Franklin had intended as Jasmine's trial instead became his referendum. Board members reviewed comprehensive data showing improvements in on-time performance, customer satisfaction, employee retention, and even early financial indicators. They heard testimonials from employees at all levels supporting the new direction. Franklin's motion for leadership review was defeated 9-3. 2 weeks later, he resigned from the board, selling his shares in a transaction that formally ended his family's 30-year association with Liberty Airways. Cameron's legal challenges continued, but they increasingly appeared as desperate attempts to salvage his reputation rather than legitimate grievances. When his discrimination lawsuit against Liberty was dismissed with prejudice, the judge citing frivolous claims unsupported by evidence, most media outlets barely noted it. The internal revolution was succeeding. What had begun as a crisis response was evolving into genuine cultural transformation. Liberty Airways wasn't just changing policies, it was changing minds and hearts. As Jasmine walked through Liberty's headquarters 6 months after the viral incident, she could feel the difference. Conversations didn't stop when she entered rooms. Employees from diverse backgrounds spoke up in meetings without hesitation. Teams collaborated across traditional departmental boundaries. The energy was palpable, the innovation that emerges when people feel valued for their full contributions rather than constrained by stereotypes. The airline that had once been a bastion of tradition was becoming a model of innovation, not despite its embrace of diversity but because of it. And in an industry where differentiation was increasingly difficult, Liberty had found its unique competitive advantage, a culture that brought out the best in every employee. 18 months after Cameron Wilson blocked Jasmine Taylor from entering the cockpit, Liberty Airways had undergone a remarkable metamorphosis. What began as a humiliating incident had catalyzed a transformation that extended far beyond diversity initiatives to touch every aspect of the airline's operations. The quarterly results told part of the story: passenger numbers up 17%, customer satisfaction scores at an all-time high, employee turnover down by 40%, and stock price 32% above pre-controversy levels. Liberty had risen from 7th to 4th in market share among comparable airlines, with analysts predicting further growth. But the numbers only captured the surface of the change. The deeper transformation was evident in the culture of the organization. In the way employees interacted with each other and with passengers, in the innovative solutions emerging from newly diverse teams, and in the pride that had returned to wearing the Liberty uniform. On a crisp autumn morning, Jasmine stood on the tarmac at JFK International Airport, watching ground crew prepare Liberty's newest aircraft for its inaugural flight. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner would be flying Liberty's first direct route to Johannesburg, South Africa, part of an ambitious international expansion that industry experts had initially dismissed as overly aggressive but now recognized as strategically brilliant. Jasmine would be piloting this historic flight herself. While her role as CEO had initially kept her from the cockpit, she had eventually established a routine of flying one significant route each month to maintain her skills and connection to the core of the airline's operations. As she conducted her pre-flight walk-around inspection, Jasmine reflected on the journey of the past 18 months. The challenges had been enormous, from Cameron's relentless legal attacks to Franklin Wilson's boardroom machinations, from skeptical investors to resistant managers. There had been moments when success seemed impossibly distant, when the personal cost seemed too high to bear. Yet here they were, not just surviving but thriving in ways that exceeded even her ambitious vision. Diego approached, tablet in hand. Final passenger count confirmed at 287. Full capacity. Perfect, Jasmine replied. And the special guests? All checked in. They're in the Liberty Lounge now. The documentary crew is set up in the terminal and has clearance for some cabin footage during boarding and after landing. This inaugural flight was more than a new route, it was a celebration of Liberty's transformation and a symbolic full-circle moment for Jasmine. Among the passengers were several former critics who had publicly requested to be part of the historic flight, including aviation journalists who had initially questioned her leadership. Most meaningful to Jasmine, however, was a special guest she had personally invited, Captain Diana Roberts, the black female pilot who had inspired her as a child at LaGuardia Airport. Now retired after a groundbreaking career, Captain Roberts would be on board to witness her former admirer make history once again. As boarding time approached, Jasmine completed her pre-flight preparations and changed into her captain's uniform. The 4 gold stripes on her shoulders still filled her with pride, even after all these years. Today, she wore them not just as a pilot but as the embodiment of possibility for every child who might see her and wonder what they could become. In the terminal, Jasmine stopped to address the gathered media before boarding. Cameras flashed as she stood confidently beside a display highlighting Liberty's transformation. Today's flight represents more than a new route, she told the assembled reporters. It represents Liberty Airways' commitment to connecting people and cultures across the globe. Our expansion into Africa is just the beginning of a new chapter for Liberty, one where we truly live up to our name by liberating the full potential of our people and the communities we serve. A reporter called out, "Ms. Taylor, many of your critics have requested to return to Liberty after initially leaving in protest of your leadership. How do you respond to these reversals?" Jasmine smiled. At Liberty, we believe in second chances and continuous learning. Our door remains open to those who share our commitment to excellence and inclusion, regardless of past disagreements. Another asked about Cameron Wilson, whose discrimination lawsuit had been dismissed months earlier. Any comment on Mr. Wilson's recent statement that he was made a scapegoat for systemic issues? Liberty Airways has moved beyond individual incidents to address the underlying systems that allowed discrimination to persist, Jasmine replied diplomatically. We wish Mr. Wilson well in his future endeavors and hope he finds the same growth opportunities we're creating at Liberty. After answering a few more questions, Jasmine made her way to the gate where passengers were beginning to board. As she walked through the terminal, Liberty employees stopped to greet her, not with the forced deference often shown to executives, but with genuine respect and camaraderie. At the gate, Jasmine was surprised to find a group of young people wearing Liberty Future of Flight Academy uniforms, the first class of cadets from the scholarship program she had established. They hadn't been on the official guest list. We wanted to see you off, Captain Taylor, explained Zoe Washington, a 19-year-old cadet whose application essay about growing up in the South Bronx with dreams of becoming a pilot had particularly moved Jasmine. You're the reason we're here. Jasmine took a moment to speak with each cadet, asking about their training and encouraging their aspirations. These young people, diverse in race, gender, and background, represented Liberty's future and the broader transformation Jasmine hoped to spark in the aviation industry. As boarding commenced, Jasmine made her way onto the aircraft. In the first-class cabin, she spotted Captain Diana Roberts and approached her with barely contained emotion. Captain Roberts, she said, extending her hand. I don't know if you remember, but 30 years ago at LaGuardia. A little girl pointed at me and told her mother she wanted to be a pilot, Diana finished, standing to embrace Jasmine instead of shaking her hand. Her mother wrote to me afterward. I kept that letter all these years. Tears threatened to well in Jasmine's eyes, but she maintained her composure. You changed my life that day. And you're changing countless lives now, Diana replied. I couldn't be prouder to fly with you today, Captain Taylor. The emotional moment was interrupted by a familiar face, Anthony Ramirez, who had been Jasmine's co-pilot during the fateful flight with Cameron Wilson. Now Liberty's chief pilot for international operations, Anthony would be her first officer again today. Everything's ready in the cockpit, Captain, he reported with a smile. As Jasmine made her way through the aircraft toward the cockpit, she was struck by the transformed cabin crew. Liberty's flight attendants now reflected the diversity of their passengers, and their training emphasized cultural competence alongside safety and service. Most remarkably, among them was Lisa Chen, who had once been a close colleague of Cameron Wilson and had initially been hostile to Jasmine's leadership. Captain Taylor, Lisa greeted her with genuine respect. We're honored to have you commanding this historic flight. The reconciliation with Lisa had been gradual and organic, a microcosm of Liberty's broader transformation. Rather than being forced to change, Lisa had evolved through exposure to new perspectives and clear demonstrations of how diversity strengthened the airline's operations. In the cockpit, Jasmine settled into the captain's seat and began final preparations. As she and Anthony ran through their checklists, she glanced out at the terminal where the cadets from the Future of Flight Academy were watching through the windows, some taking pictures, others simply observing with expressions of awe and ambition. JFK ground, Liberty 787 Heavy ready for pushback, Jasmine radioed once all preparations were complete. As the aircraft began its journey to the runway, Jasmine felt the weight of the moment, not as a burden but as a fulfillment. The little girl from Harlem who had dreamed of flying was now commanding a flagship aircraft for an airline she owned, opening new routes that would connect continents and cultures. The transformation of Liberty Airways wasn't just about policies or profits. It was about possibility, about creating a world where potential wasn't limited by prejudice, where excellence could emerge from any background, where the sky was truly the limit for anyone with the talent and determination to reach for it. As the powerful Dreamliner accelerated down the runway and lifted into the clear blue sky, Jasmine thought about all the children who might look up and wonder where the plane was going, and who might be flying it. Some of them, perhaps, would discover their own dreams in that moment, just as she had 30 years ago. Liberty Airways had been transformed. But more importantly, it was now transforming the world around it, one flight at a time. Jasmine Taylor's story teaches us that confronting discrimination requires both courage and strategy. The easy path would have been to accept Cameron's behavior as just the way things are, or to take the buyout and walk away wealthy but defeated. Instead, Jasmine chose the harder path of systemic change. Her success came not from emotional reactions but from methodical documentation, strategic alliances, and unwavering vision. She understood that discrimination thrives in silence and shadows, so she brought transparency and data to expose entrenched problems. When attacked personally, she responded with facts and professionalism. Perhaps most importantly, Jasmine recognized that true transformation happens from within. Rather than imposing change through mandate alone, she created systems that allowed employees to experience the benefits of inclusion firsthand. She met resistance with understanding but remained firm on non-negotiable principles of dignity and respect. The transformation of Liberty Airways reminds us that progress isn't inevitable, it requires individuals willing to stand firm when facing injustice, even at personal cost. It shows us that diversity isn't just a moral imperative but a competitive advantage in a global economy. And it demonstrates that sustainable change happens not through quick fixes but through consistent commitment to creating environments where everyone can contribute their full potential. What do you think about Jasmine's incredible journey? Have you ever stood up against discrimination or witnessed someone who did? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story of courage and transformation inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder that positive change is possible, even in the face of entrenched resistance. Thank you for watching, and remember, the sky's the limit when you stand firmly for what's right.